Welcome to the Craig and Greg Show, presented by Maximize Leadership. Now, here are Craig Owens and Greg Harris.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Craig and Greg Show. I'm Craig, this is Greg. You know, we want to set you up for success, but here's one of the things where we've seen organizations not be successful, and that's at the time that the key leader steps aside. And so then you have to ask yourself the question, is it really success or was it just one person? And so one of the areas that Greg has especially been focusing on is succession planning. What comes next? How do we make that transition so that the success can keep going? I was sharing with you earlier, we have that shared note on our phones where we kind of share these ideas. And when we were talking about the idea of succession planning, I was looking where I typed it in and I said, oh, oops, I typed in success planning. But that actually really is what you're kind of helping organizations do, right? Is plan for long-term success.
Well, it's so many people, Craig, work so hard endlessly. I mean, some start the company. It's their baby, in effect. And they work real hard. All of a sudden, an event maybe occurs, or the timing, or maybe age out, or you just know, God taps you on the shoulder and says, I got something else for you. But the success is all the effort of everyone. Mm-hmm. Succession planning is really to keep everyone in mind. The owner leader might move on, but they're not pulling the rug out. And I love the second word really is planning. But yeah, when you wrote that down, like success, well, yeah, succession planning should be successful.
Absolutely, I hope so.
And it's not easy.
No, it's not. But so let's talk about let's back up a little bit from before you get to that liquidity event or the tapping on the shoulder where you say, "Hey, I think it's time." When is the right time to start succession planning?
I think that's one of the first mistakes for anyone who's an owner, is they underestimate the process duration and all the moving parts, particularly if it's a big liquidity event where there's going to be some tax liability, capital gains exposure. And so they need more time to figure out, not that we don't support our country, but overtaxation is one of the reasons 1776 occurred. And so it's our goal in succession planning is to keep the values of the company, but not give away the ship. And starting early is probably one of the main emphasis. So if you're thinking like, hey, 3 years, 5 years, I'm thinking, you might want to maybe have your team, your lineup, your bullpen ready and have the discussions. It's not on fire. You're not selling it poorly. But it's better for everyone's emotions to get their arms around, hey, we took our time. I know there are some situations where you don't have time.
Absolutely.
But that's a percentage point. It's a finite number, really small. Whereas take your time. So it was interesting, succession planning that is successful, probably 60% of those start 3 years out. And that's not just replacing the CEO. That's changing shares or making sure the stocks transition, or maybe even the owner has something next. There's a lot of reasons to start early.
Well, you and I have some friends that own a tree farm, and I know in their office they've got a sign up there and say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is today.
Yes.
And so I know it doesn't necessarily need to be 20 years ahead of time, but really people should start the planning well before they think that they should start the planning.
Well, the verbiage of give yourself enough runway, if you have a big plane, it's going to take a little bit to get lift. I think in this situation here, the owner moving on is lifting. They're launching to maybe something new, a new phase in life, a new opportunity. Most of us don't do well in a hurry.
Sure.
Personal life, right? You and I are going to go down to Florida. We're going to go fishing. Hey, Craig, I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. I don't even have my socks out yet.
Right.
I don't even know what carry-on luggage I'm going to use. So it really makes sense if you have this big of a enterprise, and if you did start the company and it is your baby, you want to handle it well. It gives you time.
Now, is there you mentioned that big of a company. Is there a size, like if somebody is a smaller business, does that mean they can wait longer? If it's a bigger company, they have to start sooner. How does the size of the organization play into the lead up?
I might use the word complexity.
Okay.
So the more complex of an enterprise, probably much longer time.
Sure.
Someone who has very linear niche, and it's this is all we do, but we have 25 offices, it probably won't be as complex because it's the same service, the same model in each city.
Sure.
But if it's a little more complex, where maybe there's one engineering firm that you own part of, and they help you design a product, then you manufacture it and outsource parts, a little more complex. That's what I would say about it. Interesting fact, I really sort of don't want to believe it, but I guess I'll have to. Over 50% of businesses have no plan. Sadly, something happens to the owner. That might be a health issue or a family situation change, or they're taking care of their grandkids now, or whatever it happens to be. You don't have a lot of time if you haven't thought about it. Now, you can start and put the folder away and just maybe add something as you experience something, or you read something, or went to a conference, or talked to another business owner. But I really kind of struggle with it. Half don't have a plan, and that just allows the government to,
absolutely,
estate taxes, and it's highway robbery.
Oh, you're throwing away money by doing that.
And it puts other people in jeopardy.
Yes.
So let's say you had 100 employees at your company, you had no plan, and you got hit by a car. What do those 100 people have?
Right.
No leader, no plan, and potentially the government's going to own half the company.
Right.
And it just is not the way you want to leave your legacy. I think the other part that is fascinating now, and this is current 2022, 70% of all owners of small to medium-sized companies, not Fortune 500, Fortune 100s, but the smaller companies, family-owned, and that can be pretty big size, they really are missing the point of boomers have not transitioned or developed Xers or millennials to replace them. And it's a little bit of a humility act, or a chance to say, I'm going to put my ego down to say, when I'm done, I think you two can do this.
Sure.
Why do we want to think that way? We don't. But if we're really going to be leaders, we have to be unselfish and say, if I'm not here, I think these two people can do it.
Well, and that's what we've been all about with Maximize Leadership, with the coaching, with even our Craig and Greg show episodes that we do, is saying, develop more leaders around you. Don't try to just hoard it all to yourself.
We've seen a lot of weary leaders.
Yes, exactly.
If you're weary, please call us. We'll help you.
Right, and a lot of times they're weary because they're trying to, I'm the only one who can do all this, instead of identifying those. Yeah. So if let's just say that not having a plan would be the biggest mistake that a organization would have. What would, once people actually realize, I need to come up with something, what are some common pitfalls or mistakes or stumbles that you've seen that people run into when they start making the plan?
One immediately comes to mind is unprepared. Unprepared could come in a couple packages. One is maybe fiscally they're not in good shape, or they made a big investment. I mean, sometimes things happen, like we bought this enterprise, we're 10% paid, 90% debt, and something happens to the leader. That's a problem. So I think the unprepared part, I think if you want to leave as a leader and you want to have an internal perpetuation, is the bullpen, are the talent underneath you or alongside you, are they ready? That's the unprepared part. You can fix some things, but being unprepared also could be when the success happens and the former owner goes, now what? They're unprepared. So their hesitancy is, I don't know who I am outside of this.
Sure.
I think unprepared is probably a big one. I think the other part is making some assumptions or being unreasonable, like, for sure our company's worth, $20 million. Well, right now the industry is at 9. Oh, no, that's where we're at 20. And so they come in it with such a almost an unreasonable hope, dream.
Sure.
That I like it that people think, their house is the best or their car's the best or their dog's the best, whatever. But when you're looking at businesses, stats don't lie.
Right.
Your EBITDA is pretty much your cash flow minus the taxes, expenditures, and so forth. So I think that's another one. Maybe not picking the team that's best fit for you.
Sure.
Could be another one. I've seen it where, unfortunately, I'm working on one right now where they started with a group and it was all about hurry up and get to the sale. And he let them go. And he started over, and one of my business friends said, "Hey, Greg, I think you should come in and talk to them and just maybe walk with them, versus, hey, we're hurrying up, we put a stake in the yard, house is for sale." Well, business doesn't sell like that.
Sure.
There's due diligence and attorneys and,
Right.
Line of credit issues and a lot of things that you got to unravel yet so you can transfer. But I think being progressive and participatory in your team selection is really, really key.
Well, I think, what I hear you describing too in all of this, where I think this is kind of like our emphasis in when we're coaching with somebody is saying, let us, we're outside of your industry and we're outside of the day-to-day grind. Let us give you a better perspective. We're going to see some things and we're not emotionally invested in it. Because I think about a couple years ago when my wife had misplaced her credit card somewhere. And so, okay, we have to cancel that one and get a replacement card. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to do something and I'm like, hey, this isn't connecting. Oh, I bet it's connected to the old credit card. And we never thought about that one just because it runs automatically. You never think about it. I think that happens a lot of times in businesses. There is things run and I don't really think about them anymore. And so you, as a succession planner, you come in with a fresh set of eyes. You ask questions and spot things that people go, oh yeah, it does. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that because it's just automatic. But you're saying, yeah, but who's going to pick that up when you're not there, and what's going to happen? I would see that as being one of the biggest problem areas in succession planning when somebody starts it, is assuming that they know how to do it all themselves instead of bringing in somebody like you that's a fresh set of eyes. And then you don't, you're not a CPA, you're not an attorney, but you know the right ones to recommend to bring in for these different things. I
coined the phrase navigator because the process has got a lot of places you can go. It's Family Circle used to be an old cartoon or comic strip, and Jeffy always walked around. If his mom says, "Hey, go get Billy," and the black shoe spots would just be like the whole cartoon was full of them because he maybe he had ADHD, I don't know, or Mountain Dew.
Or maybe there's a connection.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that's probably one thing is you underestimate how long it's going to take.
Yep.
And I underestimate what things you're going to find.
Yep.
I'll give you one example. So some case studies are probably interesting to the viewers. So there's a family that has a business and there's a person in VP of sales. And so I said, hey, if I was going to ask you to compliment your sales team, what would you think of? Oh, they're competitive, they're servers, they're hungry. Okay, what would be the negative? And they had none. And I said, so could I dangerously go there with you? And he goes, sure. What's your average age of your salespersons? 54. So in roughly 6 years, they'll be 60. Maybe health issue. Maybe spouse issue, health. Maybe they decide, you know what, we're done.
We got grandkids.
We're done.
Right.
So you're a little top heavy in the age. And I said, the other thing I'd like to ask is, of your 11 salespeople, which one or two has the majority of our sales? Oh, 2 of them have 40% of our sales. So the average would be roughly 9-point-something%. Well, 2 of them have 20 plus. So we're top heavy. If they left during the succession planning, where would those customers go?
Right.
And then he had this aha, like, So one of the things that a process needs to have, a plan, right? A process. Yep. This is where a navigator or a coach, or you can use the word quarterback, helps the key advisors fit in. And one of the things I've seen happen with business owners is they have a hands-off approach to succession planning.
Mm-hmm.
Probably makes sense because they're running a company,
Sure.
right? The other one that I've seen with that is they've decided not to run the company anymore. Yeah. And they're all about the succession planning. Okay, but it's going to take us a year or two.
Right,
what are you going to do for a year or two?
Got to keep the business going.
So, they take their foot off the pedal, right? Or they put their foot off the pedal and let it go to the people. So I think the part where I'm getting at with a team is if you can trust a navigator, a quarterback to kind of keep it going, I think you can move the ball down the field without the owner always having to make the calls.
Right.
That's probably the biggest hang up for them is I already have working 60 hours a week. I don't have 22 more to do this.
Now, as a navigator, I know one of the things that even in our coaching, what you're really good at is asking those questions that uncover things, but you don't pretend to be the so here's what we got to do for your taxes and here's what we got to do for this. So you will bring in, or you can work with the existing, if there's a CPA firm or a law firm, if they don't have that, you have access to those people to bring in as well.
That's really what you're doing is you're finding someone who has resources and connections, and the network gets really big. For the business owner, of course they have a CPA, but is it a CPA who's actually done or can help with the succession planning? The execution of all those things. An attorney or a CPA, that's their lane. But really, and I just got a call from somebody in another state, and they said, yeah, right now it's really expensive. I asked my attorney to run with this. I said, oh, wow, what was that bill like? Well, after 2 months, I said, stop. I said, and what did you get? I don't really know. Yeah. I mean, just a lot of paperwork and activities, but it's a big bill. And I said, that's the challenge is you kind of have to have that person like the David and Jonathan in the Bible that you kind of knew each other, what were you good at, and to walk alongside and partner with the owner. I really like one aspect of what I'm finding to be most rewarding for the owner is interviews. Yeah. Just to find out where they're at. Could be C-level folks, could be top managers, could be their family members working, could be a spouse, whatever. Okay. It's just to interview and find out, okay, through this planning, what are your goals? Where would you like to be in this process? Sure. In the end, what would be an ideal ending, the success? And they're heard and they're kind of engaged. And I think this last one I did 10 interviews with some folks, each individual, and it really was rewarding to them. So you get me. Well, yeah, it's key because the company has to keep going.
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
Customers and there's employees and so forth. I think, the process is, are you ready? And that's a whole nother story, right? Are you ready? Or am I interested? Or wouldn't mind knowing how much is this company, Right. Then they find out, they're like, we got to keep working. Or, holy moly, let's sell it now. Yeah. Whatever the reaction is. But I think the second part is formation of the team. Sure. Formation of your company. Are you ready? Is the CPA ready? Is the CFO ready? Are they on the same page? And I think maybe the chance to increase. So what happened with the sales VP was he hired 2 newbies. And he had the 2 oldest who were 60 training the newbies to share that book of business. And you knew in a couple of years, the experienced people would move on, move to Florida or Arizona, wherever they do. And then the next ones are ready. So it really got them thinking, increase. Then I think the other part, then you make the selection. I'm going to sell to XYZ company. They look like a good fit. Or I'm going to sell internally. Looks like those people are ready. So you make that selection of how it's going to go, what turns
it's success.
And then you have success.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Greg has written a book already that's going to be coming out really soon that's called Sage Advice that I think fits in really well with this idea of succession planning because on a personal level, Sage Advice is stories that Greg learned in his childhood from his mom and dad, from his grandparents on both sides, and there's life lessons that we can take away. And so if you be watching, we got that book coming out real soon for you. But you are also, as if you're not busy enough, you've been encouraged to work on a book regarding succession planning. Is there any teasers that you want to share about that yet?
Well, I do know selling a business isn't what you got in business for, but it's inevitable.
Yes.
It's kind of like getting ready for heaven, right? We're going to run this earth. We got 65 years, 75 years, 85 years, maybe 95 years. But it's going to come to an end, right? And I think that's the part about the business. You put all your life, blood, tears, sweat, equity. I think the book so I got a buddy in Detroit, Michigan, who kind of prompted me. And you've had this with your book, the Shepherd Leadership book, and the new metrics for church and pastors is it happened pretty easy. Like you wrote it and you had some data and some, previous thoughts. And all of a sudden the chapters, you're like, you'd send them me 2 at a time. You're like, hey, I just did 2 chapters this morning. And it flowed. And I don't know how else to tell you, but it just flowed, right?
Sure.
So he, Mark Young's his guy's name, and he goes, hey, Greg, I think you should write about liquidity when a big event happens, because after that owner needs some help. And that's the other part about a navigator. It's not an attorney. It's not a CPA. It's not an M&A valuation company. I'm partnering with that owner or the owners. And I have one who said, no, basically when I sell, I'll want you to stay on. And we'll have to define what that looks like. But I do feel at some point when someone sells, their liquidity event presents a dilemma. And so my first title is Liquidity Dilemma. Should I sell? Should I sell it to them? Who should I sell it to? How do I leave? Do I stay on for 5 years? Is there an earn-out at the end? A lot of details.
Sure.
And then who am I?
Yes. What do I do after this business?
Yeah. And so I think that's a real thing to deal with when I say readiness.
Yep.
So the owner, like, are you ready? I'm so tired. No, that's not ready.
Yes.
That's just tired.
Yeah.
Are you ready? I got something else I want to do. Now we have a reason, right? I have a couple good financial planning guys, and one of the quotes that he gave was, someone will be like, how much do you want in the end? I'd like such and such million. Why? I don't know, it just sounds like a good number. That's not why you sell a company. That's not even why you build a company.
Right.
What you do with it really matters. So like the legacy you leave behind, whether it's generosity or training. But I think the selling a business is a really, really emotional process. Mm-hmm. And that's where my psychology work and training kind of comes in, is it's more than just what's the financial number.
Right. And I think that goes back to the time as well, because if you just make an emotional decision, it's not going to be the best thought out, and you need to do that.
And it's up and down. I mean, I get it, where there's a nervousness of, I had one situation where a deal fell through. I mean, you could have seen everybody just go, they were just devastated.
Yeah.
And so I had to turn it around, let them kind of process it. But I said, maybe that was God's plan. Maybe you're ready, but it wasn't the right partner to buy you out.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So it allows them to process. The other thing I'm learning too with family-owned businesses, they can't say it all around the kitchen table. So they need someone else who they can kind of share and say, I'm kind of nervous. I don't know if Bill can do this.
Right.
I really want Mary to do it, but I think she's got something going on. And they wrestle with that.
Yep.
It's basically a counselor, a pastor, a shepherd.
Yeah.
But I get to be
navigator.
I get to be the navigator. Yeah.
Well, listen, like Greg said, you really don't wait. You need to start this process probably earlier than you think that you need to start it. And so for a no obligation, if you want to just have this discussion with Greg, is it the right time for me to start planning this? And would there be a fit with Greg working as your navigator? If you go to maximizeleadership.com, you can find more information about the succession planning, the success planning for your organization, and Greg's work as your navigator. And you can just arrange to have a time to just chat with him and see if there's a fit and see if it's the right time for you. So maximizeleadership.com, check that out there. You can always tweet at us. Greg is on Twitter at Greg Harris. I'm at Craig T. Owens. And we also have for our Craig and Greg show is at Maximize Podcast. We'd love to get feedback from you and get ideas from you on topics that you'd like us to discuss in upcoming episodes. That's what we're here for, to serve you, to help you be the best successful leaders that you can be. Stay tuned. We got more content coming for you soon.
Get in touch with Craig and Greg through Twitter at Maximize Podcast or at MaximizeLeadership.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of The Craig and Greg Show.